speak to Mark Kimmitt now. He's a former deputy assistant in the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Mark, thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, 20 years on, where does the U.S.'s war on terror, as it's been called, stand today?
Well, I think if you take a look, we have seen terrorism metastasize around the world. It's no longer an issue that it's one or two large groups in countries such as Afghanistan, but you're seeing a small sized organizations proliferating throughout the world. It's almost as if these franchises have been set up in places ranging from Mauritania to Indonesia. But even though they're smaller, they are still as potent, and they still require pretty active measures to keep them suppressed inside those countries.
So, Mark, what have been the lessons for the U.S. government in facing this challenge of transnational terrorism, which in many ways has grown in scope rather than diminished?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we've got to differentiate between actions and reactions. What you're asking about is what are the U.S. and the Western world's reactions to a problem that has originated primarily in the Middle East within governments and countries that don't seem to be responsive to their people. The reactions on the Western world in the United States are that I think we now understand that the problem is not simply a military one, but the issue goes well beyond military actions to diplomacy, ideology, social conditions. And I think the major lesson that we've learned is it really is through, by, and with those countries that we can keep terrorism suppressed. We can't do it by ourselves. We must use those local countries to help us to help themselves.
Well, Mark, hindsight is always 20/20, but back in 2001, were some of the consequences of the U.S. military involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan actually foreseen by the leaders and those who took action there?
No, you're absolutely right. Hindsight is 20/20, and we'll have platoons and companies worth of people that are out there criticizing the U.S. and its reaction. But I think we've got to understand that as we looked forward on September 11th, 2001, what we recognized is that the America that I knew had been attacked in the largest attack since Pearl Harbor. We lost over 4,000 people on that day, and the American government and the American people were looking for actions to take against those who had killed so many Americans. Now, in hindsight, I would say that we learned a lot in the last 20 years about how to address terrorism. And we probably wouldn't do it the same way if this happens again in the future than we did it on September 11th, 2001. Yet there would be still a military response. We would, as President Biden, hunt them down and make them pay. But I think in the post-operational environment of nation building, democracy building, so on and so forth, I think we'd be a little more hesitant to try to impose that as part of our post-strike operations.
And Mark, you talk about the post-strike operations, and of course, America, those post-strike operations, they wanted to make the world safer for America, but also for the rest of the world. The critics, of course, have said that America hasn't made the world any safer. It's actually made it even worse. Do you agree with that?
No, I think, again, this goes to the issue of actions versus reactions. The actions of the terrorists themselves and the conditions in their societies which have created the terrorism have gotten worse over the years. We're talking about vast income inequalities in those countries, vast social disparities, vast suppression of human rights. The issue in Tunisia, when the young salesman set himself on fire because his police had in fact taken away his livelihood, that had nothing to do with America. That happened to do with a suppressive society that put these people down who believed their only resolution was to move to terrorism, to go to terrorism, to solve the problems within their societies.
Mark Kimmitt, it's always good to get your take on this, speaking to us from Istanbul. Thank you so much.